Hi, it's Adam here from adaminsights.com, and in this video I want to talk about the Kodak Pro Image 100 color negative film. There's a link in the description to my blog with a whole load of sample images. By all means go check them out and yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments on YouTube or wherever. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so this is actually a really great film and I really enjoy shooting with it. But I'll just give you a little bit of background about Kodak's color negative films so you know roughly where it sits in their range. If we were to talk about their consumer level films, so I guess things like the Kodak Gold, Kodak Max, Kodak Color Plus, the sorts of films that were kind of everywhere in the 80s and the 90s, they were consumer grade films, or they are consumer grade films, I should say. And they all tend to take a really sharp looking, vibrant, high contrast image straight out of the camera. And I mean, that's really what consumers wanted. They wanted something that looked great as soon as it came back from the lab and they could slot it into their album. And yeah, I think you probably find more photos were taken on colour film with the Kodak range than just about any other colour film, I'd say. The thing about consumer films is that to look really vibrant and to look really sharp and contrasty, they tend to have to crush the blacks, so you lose all of the detail in the blacks. They tend to use a larger grain structure in them, so to create quite quite sharp lines in the pictures, and they're quite vibrant. So it makes them quite difficult to edit with and to do more with later on. But that's okay. If people wanted to take photos for fun and they wanted just to have a nice, bright, happy look to all of their pictures, that's definitely the film that you would choose. And I think growing up, when I was taking lots of film photos and spending lots of money on getting film processed, I was using the Kodak range as well. I guess as I got more into film photography again in more recent years, the first colour film that I started with was Kodak Portra. And that film is available in ISO 160, 400 and 800, and tends to have quite muted colours. It doesn't necessarily look very sharp, but it is extremely well detailed. There isn't a lot of contrast in in any of the Portra films either, and it tends to be a very, very forgiving film with all of the shadows left open and a lot of detail in the highlights. It's fantastic for editing with. It's possibly one of the best color negative films as far as resolving powers go. And well, then there's also the Kodak Ektar film as well, and that is a 100 ISO film. I actually quite like it. It's quite a vibrant, highly saturated, highly contrasty film. Very, very sharp. Not good for photos of people because it's quite saturated, and white skin tones tend to look quite red in it. Also, it does tend to crush the shadows quite a bit. It is designed really as a landscape film, or really kind of competition for a lot of slide films out there. I actually prefer shooting, if I want to shoot really vibrant stuff, I actually prefer using Ektar than slide films, because it's easier and it's a bit more forgiving than a lot of slide films. But I guess back onto the point of this video, Kodak Pro 100. You've only got to look at the box to know that it's marketed toward like event photographers and wedding photographers. It is a 100 ISO film. It responds really well to being taken out in the daylight. It responds really well to flash photography. But what I really like about it is that it keeps all of the shadows really wide open. So even though it's a 100 ISO film, if you take photos in bad light, all of the shadows and all of the natural light just seems to get really emphasized with it. So I'll give you an example. So I for one, I love printing my photos. But I'll put this up on the screen anyway, and you can check out more photos on my blog. But here's this shot, right? And it was taken in the dark, and the only light that I had available was all of the light from the shops and the street lights. Yes, it was a long exposure, but I'm going to put a couple of other shots up in the video. These were all handheld shots taken at dusk. And the really cool thing about this film is that it just seems to work with natural and available light better than any other film that I've used. And I was kind of thinking about, why would Kodak actually engineer a film to do this? But then I had another look at the box. It's marketed toward wedding photographers, people who could be in a dimly lit chapel and might only have natural and available light to work with as well as their flash, or they want to do some creative stuff with the natural and available light, and the film is so forgiving. And this is one of the things which I love about film. Once you actually realize how a certain type of film works and what type of an image a particular line of film is going to give you under certain circumstances, you can think about that as you're shooting and you can create your pictures around it. It's kind of really cool. And here's a few more shots that I've taken in natural and available light with this film, and it just looks really cool. Just the way it keeps the shadows open. It does seem that there is a bit of a color shift when you're in bad light. So for example, these shots, the sky was not all pinky and purple like that. Definitely not. The film is definitely has quite a warm tone to it. It is meant to be daylight balanced, but it definitely has a warm tone to it throughout. Grain structure on this film, well, let's have a look at this shot of the sky. I actually think that Fuji C200, which you can also check out on my blog, actually has a finer grain, and I would actually say that Fuji C200 is a more detailed and probably crisper film than Pro 100, but Pro 100 just has this amazing quality of working with natural and available light, unlike any other film that I've used. And particularly handheld, taking photos on the street in the evening or early morning, it's something which I really like about it. But I also just say the film, as far as colours go, it seems to be a bit of a midpoint between Kodak Portra and Kodak Ektar as far as saturation and vibrancy goes. And for me personally, I kind of like that, because when I'm editing things like my Kodak Portra, I always bump up the saturation and the vibrance to get a little bit more colour oomph in my shots, unless I specifically want to have something that is quite dull and dreary. But I generally just don't like to take photos like that. I like photos with a little bit of a pop in their colour to them. So I guess onto the price. It's very, very fairly priced. In Australia you can easily have it for about $8 or $9 a roll. It's definitely cheaper than Portra from some of the other dealers that I've gone to. And it's just a really well-made, crisp, highly detailed, keeps the shadows open, nice looking colour film. But yeah, there are some better options out there if you are just wanting to have the most detail and the most accurate colour in your film. There's definitely better options out there. But if you want a film that is going to work with natural and available light better than anything else, Kodak Pro Image 100 is the way to go.